judges were biased toward musical acts. Through an awareness of intersectionality, the careers of those complicit to cover up were blighted. The reforms threatened his autocratic power. A more progressive social policy, a populist leader, gave him a speculative glance.
Dear Frau Völkers, Herr Farnholz, Herr Scherer, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Transmediale 2018 Face Value. Tonight, I'd actually like to begin with something that usually we do at the end by kind of facing value here at the very beginning, by thanking all of those who have contributed to making this year's festival possible. And I'd like to begin with my dear team members, for example, the co-curators, Daphne Dragona, who curated the conference program, Inga Seidler, curator of the exhibition program, and Florian Wüst of the film and video program. It's been a real pleasure to put together this year's festival with you. I'd like also to thank the program coordination and assistance that were carried out by Amelie Buchinger, Olga Wiedemann, Jakob Frese, and Sabrina Kürzinger, and the entire communication and marketing team, headed by Filippo Giannetta, with the aid of Maria Lechner, our press officer Tabia Hampel, editors Natalie Schütze and Judith Jung, and of course also the journal editor Elvia Wilk. And their efforts were all boosted, as always, by the design of the laboratory of Manuel Bürger, so a great thanks to Manuel and his team again. On the production and administration side, I'd like to thank Magdalena Ritter, Sibylle Kerlich, Philipp Sünderfrauf and his Surview team, as well as Francesco Apuzzo, Marcus Bader, and they're part of Raumlabor Berlin, our architects. Thanks to Laura Oldenburg and Sebastian Goebel that are doing our web development as 1.0. Not done yet. There's a, it's a big undertaking, this festival. If you've seen the size of the program, it was indispensably aided this year by Ann-Christine Pilda, Julia Messer, Lukas Gloe, Nicola Angeliles, Ann-Kathrin Heidenreich, Adam Esnan, Merit Kidelen, and Christian Kleinwächter. There were two much cherished members of the Transmediale administration team that left for other career pursuits. Hope they're here tonight. I'd like to thank them, Katarina Grazel-Kanicznik and Sanga Lenz, who contributed greatly over several years and also partially to this year's festival. Finally, also a great thanks to all the festival volunteers. I'd like us to give all these mentioned team members and the volunteers a big, great applause. That's so much for the wonderful team. Moving on to our supporters and funders. First of all, I would like to thank the Kulturstiftung des Bundes, that is the German Federal Cultural Foundation. They are our main funders and provide that security that makes it possible to do the festival on a long-term basis. In addition to the Kulturstiftung, there are two other funders that have regularly been there, and they're there again this year. That's the Medienboard Berlin-Brandenburg and the Bundeszentrale für politische Bildung. So a great thanks for being aboard again. Our venue, the HKW, is a real cornerstone of the festival. Thanks Herr Scherer and the entire house for the cooperation and support. Also thanks to our Projektträger. That's our administrative host organization here in the city, Kulturprojekte Berlin. Thanks to them and the Geschäftsführer Moritz van Dülmen. Another important partner of the festival is the CTM festival that's happening in parallel. So I would like to mention its directors Jan Rolf, Oliver Bauhen, and Remco Schürbias for this ongoing cooperation and dialogue on how to create the best possible synergies between these two festivals. And Finally, as part of this, I'd like to thank the Transmediale Advisory Board, especially Jan Edler, who kind of served his last term as part of the board in 2017. But the board I'd like to mention is now joined by Hito Steil and Ben Vickers. So these are kind of the pillars of Transmediale in terms of people and institutions. But as every year, we have different partnerships, special projects. One of them that actually has been there for several years now that helps us develop also the conference program is the Winchester School of Art. I'd like to especially thank its head, Edith Sousa, the professors Ryan Bishop and Jussi Parikka. We're also grateful to have the European Union aboard. So their Creative Europe program funds a network that is called the New Network Normal. This includes the Abandoned Normal Devices Festival in Manchester, the Influencers and CCB in Barcelona, as well as Stripe in Eindhoven. And through this program, we've been able to, it has co-funded some of the main projects of this year's festival, including the Territories of Complicity exhibition in the exhibition hall downstairs, as well as the specially commissioned performance Plague by James Ferraro and his collaborators. Further artists and projects were brought here with the support of the Creative Industries Fund of the Netherlands, the British Council, and our long-term partner, the Canadian Embassy in Berlin. So yesterday we had the yearly Marsha McLuhan lecture, which was with a great talk by Megan Bowler, who you can also catch later in the conference. And this year also this McLuhan program extends into a larger ongoing exhibition project called Feedback. So you can see Feedback #2 as part of this series, curated by Baruch Gottlieb at the Eigen Art Lab and Humboldt University. There's another program that started actually also before the festival. That's our yearly PhD research workshop, which is a kind of a think tank on the theme of the festival. That's realized always with the organization and support of Aarhus University, and this year it was held in Potsdam at the ZEM, the Brandenburg Center for Media Studies. Great thanks to both Aarhus University and ZEM. At last, but certainly not least, I'd like to personally thank my partner Linda and son Wilbur, sitting up there somewhere, for their love, of course, and the great patience that you've shown, yes, always during this festival season. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. Everything simply is what it is, and everyone tells it like it is. It means it. It will be great again because I say it, and my Twitter followers too. The people are the people, and since we have done it, we can do it again and again. Transmediale 2018 is Transmediale 2018 is Transmediale 2018 is Transmediale 2018. Indeed, it seems as if taking things at face value has become a kind of dogma of our times. So the original meaning of this term, as you can see in this definition, is nominal value. So face value is that which is visibly stated on a financial document, such as on the face of a coin. As the most immediately apparent value of something, it's a fixed reference point in an otherwise highly unstable world, but also something that always needs to be checked against some other, perhaps more abstract process of valuation, such as inflation or deflation. So hence this warning usually not to take things at face value as the expression where this term most commonly appears. And that refers to how possibly something that's not directly visible influences what is seemingly apparent. And well, in the process of developing the program of this year's festival under this title and this theme, I also asked myself, so what is the face value of Transmediale itself? What could that be? So after all, Transmediale is this complex entity that, you know, it doesn't work according to one unifying approach. It's a transversal approach across different disciplines and media, obviously. And it kind of seems contradictory to then try and lock that down to one obvious thing. But at the same time, these kind of confusing political times we're living in seem to require to take a stand for something. So there's this actual need maybe to both renounce and call upon face value, and it seems to produce now an ongoing tension between pluralistic values and issues of power, representation, and agency. And often these problems or such questions are problems of legitimization. And I think that, you know, digital art and culture festivals and other similar big digital culture events, they face kind of a dilemma today. So putting art and digital culture together just doesn't seem to be enough in, you know, in times when, as we like to say in Germany, Digitalisierung is like a very commonplace word and agenda that describes not only the digitization of media any longer, but seemingly of the entire society. Or as actually Jeff Cox put it poignantly in our yearly research workshop 2 days ago, art, and I quote, art and digital culture is the least unlikely of alliances. So in this climate, much more important than, you know, promoting digital art and culture per se is the question of what paradigm of digitization provides the agenda rather than this magic word of digitization as such. So not taking the digital at face value, in other words. And maybe this is somehow, you could think, paradoxically the face value of transmediale, that it's never just about stating the obvious, but always about digging deeper and finding kind of new reflections about or on the technological condition of contemporary society. But somehow I can't help thinking also that this seems too obvious. So as if art, and especially kind of critical art practices and speculative theories such as the ones that we feature at the festival are kind of doomed to always repeat this dialectic of a surface appearance and the depth of critical revealing. So because isn't it also so that the surface appearance of something or an event that one subjects then to this critical scrutiny is also that which can lead one to the critical possibility in the first place. And may also not surfaces lead to many different kinds of revealings or refractions, maybe, to kind of riff on Donna Haraway. And if this sounds too much like it could actually lead to, you know, the much feared world of alternative facts, I think that for anyone working within art and digital culture, or art and culture in general, it's rather this locking down of the creation of multiple meanings into rigid frameworks of interpretation that one now should fear the most, rather than this unreliability of the so-called post-truth era. And in some of the most, I think, commonplace political rhetorics of this era then, such lockdowns often come from those who, with their value systems, claim to represent something, claim to represent the people in a one-to-one way, while obviously resting their arguments on violent kind of mechanisms of exclusion. So when asked for explanation, only tautologists come back, stating what should be obvious and apparent to everyone without any need for further explanation than a reference back to one's own authority or the data to back that up. This kind of circular logic of terms and values representing only themselves, that seems to me increasingly to be at the heart of communication in a datafied and algorithmically governed media culture, where having the most followers or the biggest data sets and most effective algorithms to mine them gives you this kind of edge over the real. So these are times maybe not of less, but of more truth, considering how many are now kind of involved in the production of truth and who claim then to represent it and wants thereby to be taken at face value. And the internet and digital technologies, of course, on a whole, once promised this disruption of all dogmas. But let's remember also that something like cryptocurrencies have face value too. So it's rather perhaps the material condition for fixing the face value that has changed. So Bitcoin, for example, is so-called multi-denominational. So it means that its possible face values are not limited in range due to the limitations of physically stamping coins or bills, or print bills. The face value of Bitcoins logically rather follows its digital mediality and its rapids up and downs on the market. And they tend therefore to be set not in units of like wholes or tens, but rather in thousands, so such as 0.001, or theoretically even in 100 millionths of a whole Bitcoin. That would be 0.000000001 Bitcoin. So in today's communicational climate, with this abundance of populist political messages and propaganda, much also perhaps thanks to influence that algorithms that target, or algorithms of targeted communication. One could argue that the face value of public discourse has been multiplied in numbers, like in these deflationary values or face values of Bitcoin. But here maybe it's aiming at kind of looking at how it is meaning that has been deflated in a kind of similar way. So try to have an argument with a face value of 0.0000 and so forth, 1. So it might sound Hitlerian, but meaning itself is of course now perhaps also a nostalgic concept and should rather be left to the number crunching algorithms to predict. All the while we humans can either relax or despair in a kind of myopic, timeless state, a nearsighted real that is constantly being automated anew. And where this automation will eventually take you is usually, unfortunately, not something that you can just choose, but it will mostly likely choose for you. So it's not the old Microsoft slogan, where do you want to go today anymore, but rather where you really wanted to go today based on the data that we got of you. And this future, which is, I think, already here, gets very dark when you think about the discrimination that is built into everything from, well, pattern recognition, biometric profiling, credit line evaluation, or citizen scoring. Value and values here uncannily merge into one. So cultural values are today's ghost in the machine, and increasingly they reflect an authoritarian neoliberal system and its means of economic extraction. And this finally brings me back now to the question of the face value of transmediale, which I think has to be plural and singular at the same time, but never without a sense of direction. So in her introduction to the face value journal that we publish along with the festival, Elvia Wilk writes about the kind of circular feedback loop that we have to get out of, and I quote, "Flipping the coin will never help explain the nature of its value, but will only continue to show its faces, its surfaces." So instead she uses the beautiful analogy of alchemical transmutation to advocate melting down the coin. And I quote again, "in order to find or create something worth more." So the idea is then that this opening already should be an occasion to stake out some directions or instructions for these kind of transmutations of the present to take place. And that's why we conceived this year's event not as an opening ceremony, but it will now switch very soon into the mode of an opening rally, which does not mean that Ben Shearer is going to drive a Porsche across the stage. It's a rally as in a political gathering. And of course, the word rally originally comes from realigner, so a realignment, a gathering and a realignment. And what is kind of being brought together and realigned here are the different speakers that in the next day in very different kinds of formats and events will speak and offer workshops and so forth. And here for this opening, we asked the participants to actually rally more around the core messages of their various contributions. So this is a polyvocal approach to the opening and to the question of the face value. And there's no less than 10 guests that each in their own way will deliver their face value statements. So the idea is that you get some insights in what to expect from the festival and what will probably be further also deconstructed in the festival in terms of people, topics, and in other words, some face value of face value. So with that, I'd like to move to the first sequence of speakers. You might already have noticed that we did not begin with the traditional welcoming words from HKW, but in the first batch of speakers we have asked the director of HKW, Ben Shearer, to give a statement. It will be followed by the Transmediale Advisory Board, head of the Transmediale Advisory Board, Marie-Louise Angerer. She's a media theorist that specializes in theories of affect. And Marie-Louise will be followed by the writer and activist Alex Foti, who will be speaking out for the continued struggle of the precariat of Europe. He is also, like most of the other speakers, part of the conference program. In his case, event number 10, The Many Faces of Fascism. We're in event number 1 now. That's going to be one of the main conference panel here in the auditorium tomorrow afternoon. And after Alex, we have, as a final contributor in this first sequence, Mark Garrett, who's co-director and co-founder of the UK arts collective, online arts collective Furtherfield. And he will be moderating a discussion on nefarious values on Friday morning, event number 22. Now, please, thank you for your attention and welcome all these first speakers, starting with Ben Shearer.